This video will look at local legends, Neolithic prehistory, and bizarre folk rituals on the stunning north coast of the southwestern English county of Devon. On the picturesque North Devon coast in southern England lies a lone Neolithic standing stone that has a very interesting local legend attached to it, for it is said that a young Jesus Christ himself once visited. Now this is a bold and fairly fanciful claim, but before delving into the possibility of Christ's presence here, let's first look at the stone itself. The menhir, or standing stone, is somewhat mysterious and is the lone megalithic monument within a field close to the seaside village of Combe, east of the larger settlement of Ilfracombe and just inland from the Hangman Cliffs, the largest coastal drops in England. This location gives the stone its local name, the Hangman Stone. The hangman moniker owing to a local sheep-stealing legend, where the unlucky rustler was said to have met his end, dangling from the immense rock face 800 feet above the raging sea below. The singular stone stands at a modest 5 feet 5 inches tall, but the setting lends it a majesty that eludes far larger megaliths. There is some evidence of other prehistoric earthworks nearby, but to all intents and purposes it stands alone in this quiet pasture, with nothing but the distant sounds of waves, songbirds, and the occasional snorting of horses in the adjacent field. One of its distinguishing features is its unusual red coloration, comprised of local stone. It feels almost fabricated, smooth and soft to the touch, but is absolutely genuine. Local folklore and anecdotes add to the historical and cultural significance of the megalith. According to local accounts, dowsers considered the stone to be particularly powerful, an indication of its potency for those that adhere to such beliefs. But the most striking legend suggests that Jesus visited the site during his youth, aligning it with broader narratives of sacred destinations in England, such as Glastonbury. The stone is located in an area of natural beauty, surrounded by rolling hills to the north and a valley to the south. On a clear day, the stone stands as a jewel amidst grasses and wild flowers. Initially, I went into the wrong field looking for it, but in a landscape like this, there's not really any such thing as the wrong place. I stumbled upon evidence of a historic slaked lime kiln in the middle of this adjacent patch of land, with its telltale bricks and an old plough that looked like it were placed merely for photogenic purposes. Of course it was not, and this is a visual representation of the pace of life down here in the southern reaches of England. The legend of a young Jesus visiting this land during his youth has captured the imagination of many over the centuries. It is relayed in William Blake's Jerusalem in the lines, "And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green, and was the Holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen." The origin of the legend of the young Jesus in England primarily stems from medieval folklore and religious stories. One of the earliest accounts derives from claims about Glastonbury by William of Malmesbury in the 12th century that were added to form the legend. There is a later manuscript entitled The Life of Joseph of Arimathea, which suggests that Joseph, a tin trader, visited the south of England, which is rich in the metal that is an essential component in the manufacture of bronze. Medieval accounts also link Joseph with the Holy Grail and Arthurian romances. In Sir Thomas Malory's 15th century work, Le Mort d'Arthur, when Galahad receives a vision of the Grail, he sees Joseph standing at the altar, dressed as a bishop. It was claimed invariably that Joseph was Jesus' uncle and brought the youngster with him on a voyage to the now counties of Cornwall, Devon and Somerset, where he is alleged to have studied the ways of the Druids. Although unfortunately there is no hard evidence or gospel account to verify Christ's presence in England. During the Middle Ages, England was a hub of religious activity and pilgrimage. The spread of Christianity was a central theme, and tales of significant biblical figures visiting the land held particular allure. For places such as Glastonbury, the legend of Jesus' visit could have been a means to bolster religious significance and attract pilgrims, contributing to its perpetuation. It's a tantalising idea, however, and one that has woven itself into the folklore of the West Country, a region that, way back in history, and in no small part due to its natural resources, was part of an interconnected world of trade and the exchange of ideas from far-flung locations. Into the modern era, perhaps inevitably, the site of the stone has taken on further paranormal significance. It has, like a number of other ancient sites across England, been associated with UFO activity, adding another layer of mystery. Whatever the truth of such tales, whether godly or extraterrestrial, it is a beautiful and tranquil location and is off the beaten track, making it one of the lesser-known prehistoric sites in Britain. If you're in the area, it is well worth visiting. A strange ceremony that looks and feels like the one portrayed in The Wicker Man takes place each year in a picturesque Devon village and features a series of ritual mock executions. Welcome to Combe, where the onset of spring is marked by an annual custom known as the hunting of the Earl of Roan. On my first night there, I took a walk around the village to soak up the atmosphere. Hello, so I'm in the picturesque village of Combe in Devon, home to a very strange ritual which I will go into later, but it's sort of dusk now and the place is very quiet and it's a very picturesque, beautiful village, but at this time of night with no one around and not much going on, it takes on a very Wicker Man-esque vibe. While the story that underpins this folk festival dates to a 17th century legend, as we shall see there are deeper and far older traditions that are hinted at in the carefully observed ritual procession through the village and to the sea. It can be argued that this tradition harks back to truly ancient Indo-European descended fertility rites with parallels in Norse, Germanic and Celtic paganism, among others. Banned in 1837 for licentiousness and drunken behaviour, the hunting of the Earl of Roan was revived in the village in 1974, perhaps by accident or design, just a year after The Wicker Man was released. The hobby horse, or obios as it's sometimes called, and the fool of the Wicker Man's fictionalised ceremony are present in the real Earl of Roan rite. So, what is the story of the Earl of Roan, and what happened during his hunting? Legend states that the Earl was Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone, who was forced to flee Ireland in 1607 and was shipwrecked in the nearby bay that has become known as Rapparee Cove. The stricken Earl then holed himself up in the hilly woodland surrounding the village and subsisted on ship's biscuits. He was then said to have been apprehended by a group of grenadiers dispatched from Barnstaple. It is a fanciful tale and one which has no basis in historical fact. There is no evidence the Irish nobleman was shipwrecked on the North Devon coast, and there are verified accounts of his successful escape to Spain. So how did the legend come to pass? It is possible the locals were celebrating the capture or killing of a local outlaw and superimposed the Earl of Roan onto this scallywag. It would not be the first time this has happened, whereby a generic wild man figure has been identified with a particular person. Famous examples are the legend of Robin Hood and of Merlin or Myrdin Wilt, the so-called wizard who became bound up with Arthurian mythology. My previous video on the Horned God and the European Wild Man, linked below, delves further into these themes, but I will touch on them later in this video also. At the village museum I found this fascinating little book, which I will partially quote from at times. Also while at the museum I encountered the Earl himself, or rather the ritual costume to be donned by the sacrificial lamb that will wear it. The site is also home to the brightly coloured hobby horse and other items of local regalia, as well as historic pictures of past ritual events on display in the attic. Turning to the ritual itself, over the 4 days of the spring bank holiday weekend, costumed actors play various choreographed parts. There is also plenty of revelry and drinking taking place at the village's pubs, including the iconic pack o' cards. There are grenadiers, a hobby horse and a fool who, alongside villagers, hunt each day for the elusive Earl of Roan, with his discovery taking place on the Monday night. Once apprehended, the Earl is mounted on a donkey and ridden, facing backwards through the village to the sea. Along the route, the prisoner is frequently shot by the grenadiers to be brought back to life by the mysterious powers of the hobby horse and the fool. He is, at each turn, remounted on the donkey to continue the procession ever towards the North Devon coast. The final firing squad forms up on the beach, where the Earl of Roan is not revived and is tossed into the sea. I myself took an icy plunge into the choppy waters of the sea at Combe on a drizzly and cloudy day, in homage to the unfortunate Earl of Roan. So what is this strange custom all about? Unsurprisingly, with a historic ritual event, there are a number of theories as to its origin and/or influences. Some see it as a hangover from traditional medieval May games, with others seeing the ever-present foliate hand of the Green Man and pagan custom as the genesis of the event. Some also see the Earl of Roan as akin to a scapegoat whose ritual but thankfully dramatised suffering will wash away their sins. While outlining these theories, my little red book on the subject is keen to point out that, whatever the historical or folkloric basis of the festival, this event is a celebration of the quaintness and differentness of Combe Martin as a village. And it has to be said that charitable collections are also made throughout the event. A historic account from 1863 by the Reverend G. Tugwell was recorded in the North Devon Scenery Book. Part of this account read, "At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon the Grenadiers marched with all due pomp and circumstance of war to the neighbouring plantation called Lady's Wood, and after much parade of search discover the fugitive Earl of Roan, ineffectually hidden in the low brushwood. They immediately fire a volley, lay hold of their prisoner, set him on the donkey with his face towards the animal's tail, and thus conduct him in triumph to the village. Here the hobby horse and the fool, and great numbers of the inhabitants join in the procession. At certain stations in the village the grenadiers fire a volley, when the earl falls from his donkey apparently mortally wounded. Hereupon there is great exultation on the part of the soldiers, and excessive lamentation on the part of the hobby horse and the fool. After great exertion the latter invariably succeeds in healing the earl of his wounds, and then the procession reforms and marches onward once more. At every public house there is also a stoppage for purposes of refreshment, and as there are many such houses in Combe Martin, the progress of the mummers is necessarily slow. Moreover, there are further innumerable delays, caused by the perpetual efforts of the performers to levy additional contributions from the visitors who throng the street. As a general rule, small sums are given readily, for in case of refusal the fool dips the besom which he carries in the nearest gutter, and plentifully besprinkles the rash recusant. And should not this hint be promptly taken, the hobby horse proceeds to lay hold of the victim's clothes with his mapper, and this detains his prisoner till the required blackmail is forthcoming. About nightfall the procession reaches the sea. And that's where the account ends. It is possible the ritual execution suffered by the Earl of Roan character is a dramatic rendering of the ancient concept of the threefold death. This fate is suffered by heroes and gods according to reconstructed Proto-Indo-European mythology, and is seen in the traditions of descended peoples from Greek, Indic, Celtic and Germanic cultures. An example that is relatively well known comes from the Norse tradition. Odin sacrifices himself to himself by hanging on the world tree Yggdrasil to gain knowledge of the runes. Another possible precursor of the Earl of Roan procession could lie in the rituals associated with the Germanic goddess Nerthus. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, Nerthus was the mother goddess of the Langobardi or Lombards, a Germanic tribe who inhabited what is now northern Italy. The goddess was said to have dwelt in a sacred grove on an island in a lake. On this island was a sacred chariot, a clear reference to reconstructed Proto-Indo-European beliefs. The chariot could only be touched by an initiate priest of the goddess, and it was surrounded by a fabric structure or curtain. On special occasions Nerthus would appear behind it, and would be led through the settlement pulled by cows and on show so that people could see her. Wars and conflicts were forbidden during this procession, and a time of great celebration would ensue. When the carnival-like event was over, the chariot and cows, and most likely the goddess herself, were washed by slaves in the sacred lake. Tacitus refers to the fate of the slaves by calling the lake a place of mysterious terror, as they were drowned following the ritual cleansing. Tacitus says the Langobardi are distinguished from neighbouring tribes by a common worship of Nerthus, that is, Mother Earth, and believes that she intervenes in human affairs and rides through their peoples. His account continues, there is a sacred grove on an island in the ocean, in which there is a consecrated chariot draped with cloth that the priest alone may touch. He perceives the presence of the goddess in the innermost shrine, and with great reverence escorts her in her chariot, which is drawn by female cattle. There are days of rejoicing then, and the countryside celebrates the festival, wherever she designs to visit and accept hospitality. No one goes to war, no one takes up arms, all objects of iron are locked away, then and only then do they experience peace and quiet, only then do they prize them, until the goddess has had her fill of human society, and the priest brings her back to her temple. Afterwards the chariot, the cloth, and, if one may believe it, the deity herself are washed in a hidden lake. The slaves who perform this office are immediately swallowed up in the same lake. Hence arises dread of the mysterious and piety which keeps them ignorant of what only those about to perish may see. There is a Norse connection here too, in the form of the Vanir god Njordr, who shares the root of his name with Nerthus. Effectively, the name means earth. According to mythology, Njordr's incestuous relationship with his sister led to the birth of Freyr and Freya. Freya was associated with sexuality and promiscuousness in the context of a fertility goddess. Her brother, Freyr, was also a fertility deity, often depicted with an enormous phallus. As the boar-riding Yngwi, or lord, he was also said to have been the ancestor of the kings of Sweden, whereby the Yngling dynasty was formed. Springtime sacrifices made to him, like those at Gamla Uppsala in Sweden, were said to bring successful harvests and prosperity. The Slavic goddess of winter, death and rebirth, Morana, was associated with ritual drowning during public celebrations. In many Slavic societies, Morana was worshipped through ceremonies that marked the changing seasons, particularly the transition from winter to spring. These rituals often involved symbolic acts such as burning effigies, which were then thrown into lakes, or the effigies were simply thrown into lakes without the prior burning, depending on different practices in different Slavic societies. The custom was said to represent the defeat of winter and the triumph of spring, and offerings of food, drink and flowers were also made at the same time. Returning to that little book I bought in Combe offers an association with the Green Man, and by extension the Wild Man of the Woods, or Woodwoes. The book cites James George Fraser's 1890 work, The Golden Bough, which it says included a great many similar figures, but without named people associated, from customs right across Europe. It added, in the many examples that he cites of greenery-clad figures or disguised figures fetched out of the woods, which are then processed around the village and eventually executed, with or without mock trial, Fraser sees the remnants of an ancient spring ritual of killing a king of the woods. It goes on to cite a couple of examples. It read, in Saxony and Thuringen there is a Whitsunday ceremony called chasing the wild man out of the bush, or fetching the wild man out of the wood. A young fellow is enveloped in leaves or moss and called the wild man. He hides in the wood and the other lads of the village go to seek him. They find him, lead him captive out of the wood and fire at him with blank muskets. He falls like dead to the ground, but a lad dressed as a doctor bleeds him and he comes to life again. At this they rejoice, and binding him fast to a wagon, take him to the village, where they tell all the people how they have caught the wild man. The other example was a Shrovetide custom from Bohemia, in which a man dressed up as a wild man is chased through several streets until he comes to a narrow lane, across which a cord is stretched. The book says he stumbles over the cord and, falling to the ground, is overtaken and caught by his pursuers. The executioner runs up and stabs with his sword a bladder filled with blood, which the wild man wears around his body, so the wild man dies while a stream of blood reddens the ground. Next day a straw man made up to look like the wild man is placed on a litter, and accompanied by a great crowd is taken to a pool, into which it is thrown by the executioner. The ceremony is called burying the carnival. So a vegetation-clad figure who is caught, paraded around the village and then in effigy is killed by drowning or burning was once widespread. There are many other iterations of the ritual hobby horse and fool also. These common threads exist in too many places to be accidental parochial quirks without powerful ancient underpinnings. The sacred transition from winter to spring and the hope for a good harvest to outlast the next winter is a powerfully charged time even now. To our ancient ancestors it was a life and death situation. These folk customs go extremely deep and harken back to the earliest days of the Proto-Indo-European culture that is shared by so many successors in Europe and beyond. There is little wonder then that these aspects were incorporated into the horror of the Wicker Man. They are at once alien but also eerily familiar. They are almost latent in the collective consciousness of Britain. The hunting of the Earl of Roane in Combe is for me a vivid example of this. So while I was at first slightly on edge to be wandering around the village at dusk with ideas of human sacrifice and arcane rituals seemingly swirling through the quiet streets, my overriding feeling now is the same as those who venerate this time of year: relief. Relief that, for now at least, winter is over. The beautiful coast of North Devon holds a dark secret in the form of a grim local legend. The foreboding name of the Hangman Cliffs near Ilfracombe provides some clue to this folkloric tale. The cliffs are the highest sea cliffs in England, with Great Hangman descending 800 feet, 244 metres, from the undulating pasture to the roaring sea below. A nearby Neolithic menhir or standing stone also bears the name the Hangman Stone, like a number of others across Britain. This megalith is also the subject of another incredible legend involving Jesus Christ himself. I covered that particular tale earlier in this video. The Hangman name refers to a case of harsh instant justice that allegedly took place in the distant past, and a legend that appears in disparate locations, but here was the first literary version of the tale. Thomas Westcott explains the legend in his 1630 work, A View of Devonshire. In his account, he is describing various locations in the county before outlining the legend. He wrote, "This parish is separated from Combe Martin by bound stones only, one of which they term Hangman Stone. The reason demanded, it was answered, that a thief having stolen his neighbour's sheep, bound the legs together, and casting him upon his shoulders, the legs compassing his neck, he came to the stone, which is some 4 feet in height, pitched in the earth, and thinking there to ease himself for a while of his heavy burden, the sheep laid on the stone, on a sudden so struggle drew him backward beyond his power to recover, that he was choked. And now are we clear of this parish." So it seems the thief tethered the sheep and rested by the stone before falling asleep, and the sheep tightened the rope around him, leading to his death. As mentioned, this legend appears to have travelled, with examples of hangman stones or markers found in numerous places where the name of the settlement has been substituted for a local one. These legends spread at a time when the rural economy was of the utmost importance, and sheep stealing carried a penalty of hanging to reflect this. There is another explanation of the name that could reveal an intriguing fusion of Celtic and Germanic languages. Devon as a location would have straddled the two cultures following the Anglo-Saxon arrival in what is now England. The name Hangman is theorised by some to be a mixture of Mynydd, which in Welsh means mountain, and hang, which is the Germanic word for slope. So, macabre legend or intriguing etymological cocktail, how did the name come to pass? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and most importantly subscribe. And you can also support the channel on Subscribestar via the link in the description, or via YouTube Super Thanks. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.